Ladies and gentlemen, this is David Mirikitani with episode 181 of Weighing In. We're brought to you through a partnership with USA Wrestling, the national governing body for the sport of wrestling in the United States, and sponsored by Nike Wrestling. Visit Athlete PS for all your Nike Wrestling and USA branded wrestling gear. Mark Ostrander, welcome back, man. We've been talking a lot. I'm fired up about this week.
Yeah, I got a lot of stuff to go over. It was a big weekend last week. A lot of cool, crazy things happened, so it'd be fun to go through some of it.
Yeah. So let's start out at the very top with the U.S. Olympic trials. Literally got the email. We were recording this on about noon Central Time on Thursday, and
Correct.
got the email less than an hour ago. The trials are going to Fort Worth, Texas. So to kind of, this is just me talking. This is not from USA Wrestling, but I think what happened was Penn State can't host the trials on campus because of COVID. If you can't host the trials on campus, it can't be profitable. They can't sell tickets. That's the way they make up the upfront expenses. So I think they're excited to be able to host it in 2024. The trials go to Fort Worth, Texas, which I was lucky enough to be there a couple of years ago for the US Open. That's when Spencer Lee wrestled for the first time in forever in freestyle. It's a super cool, I don't know if it's the same venue, but it's in that area. And they do a great job down there. I know it's not a wrestling hotbed like Iowa or Oklahoma or Pennsylvania, but I think it's a win-win.
Oh, I agree. And it's really good that Penn State got the 2024 trials. They let them have it for that year without putting a bid up because of COVID, obviously everything's changed. So that's outstanding because that is a wrestling mecca here in the United States.
Yeah.
So they will get 16, 17,000 fans for all sessions there. So that's outstanding. I think down in Texas, it will go over big again. Like you said, they a year and a half ago, they had it down there. So, and they had a good crowd. Hopefully this will be much bigger because the talent is going to be out of this world.
I think they will. Like the US Open is obviously a precursor for things, but even the casual fans like Olympic trials, right? Like, oh my God, this decides our Olympic team. So I think, like you and me have talked off the air a lot about, all these clubs and everybody are putting matches together and there's great matchups. But the reason why people love great matchups are they matter, right? Like you coach some great kids and probably some of the practice matches were amazing, but they didn't mean anything because they were not wearing singlets, they're not keeping score. Whoever wins that is just, they probably get to sit on their favorite seat on the bus. That's it. Like they're bragging rights, but it's not like to be a national champion, to be a state champion, to be a world champion, to be an Olympic champion, So matches that matter would get a lot of the fair weather fans, the less than super hardcore dorks like us would get people jacked.
Sure. And you know what? You can't be an Olympic champion unless you go through this trial.
So that's exactly right.
That's the big key. This is the biggest.
It matters. Yeah.
It's the biggest event most of these kids will ever wrestle in because this is how you get to the Olympics. Yeah. And you can't fulfill your dreams if you can't get through this step.
Well, we'll cover
the previous steps, David, to even qualify for the Olympic trials has been outstanding to watch. So, it's going to be a little bit different because they've had to sit and wait for almost a year. Yeah. Most of them have already qualified a year ago. Now it's time to perform. I can't wait to see what happens.
Well, and we did a breakdown a year and a half ago of who's already qualified, who are the big names that haven't qualified, the last chance qualifier. And for people that are confused, there's two last chance qualifiers. There's a last chance qualifier to make the Olympic trials in the United States. And then there's a last chance qualifier to qualify the weight class for the Olympic Games. And the women have qualified all 6 weights. Men's freestyle has qualified 5 weights. 65 kilos is the weight that hasn't qualified, which is the Zane, Yanni, Jordan, the rest of those guys' weight. And then Greco has qualified 4 of the 6 weights. So we have 15 of 18 weights qualified as a country. To jump gears, USA Wrestling has agreed to host the national tournament for the D3s. You and I talked about this. The D3s got canceled, I think, probably about 12 minutes after we recorded our podcast last week.
Yep.
And no, I think we talked about it last week on the air about how these kids don't get scholarships and everything else. USA Wrestling stepped up in a huge way. I think I would say this about anybody. I think would say this if Open Mat had done it, Flow had done it, Track had done it. if Frank Popolizio in New York had done it, if any of those guys had done it, people giving these kids a chance to wrestle when they got deprived last year and we're going to lose it this year. Huge shout out to USA Wrestling.
And it'd be great, and I understand why D3 did what, had to do what they did, because I think they said almost half of the schools were not even able to compete this year because of the COVID protocol. So, I mean, the kids that are competing, yeah, let's give them a shot to go out and perform and see where they stand up against all the other guys in Division III that are still wrestling. So, hats off to USA Wrestling for putting this together.
Yeah. Well, and you, like myself, we're not undefeated in life or in wrestling, but I think the biggest disappointment you and I have is not competing and losing. It's not getting the chance to compete if something like that were to happen. Like I lost my senior year of eligibility in college because I actually graduated on time, and the rule back then was you couldn't transfer. And I had beaten somebody that was a Division I All-American and never got that chance. I would rather have gone to the Nationals the next year, gone 0-2, lost in the regional and not qualified, than to wonder about that. And that's, it's if that's the worst thing that happened in my life, I'm doing great. But just to be deprived of the opportunity is hard. And I'm happy these kids that deprivation isn't going to happen for them.
Yeah, I agree 100%.
Yeah, for sure. So the next thing, which is very interesting to me, is Flow Wrestling bought Track Wrestling. So
I didn't see that coming. Did you?
A little bit, a little bit. Track Wrestling was originally created by Justin Tritz. Justin Tritz a couple of years ago sold it to Sports Engine. Sports Engine is owned by NBC Sports, which is obviously owned by big NBC. So obviously they have a ton of money. I think most people on just that one surface level thought, well, it'd be easier for Track to buy Flow than Flow to buy Track. I think how this all shakes out is going to be super interesting. You're going to see obviously some redundancies get eliminated, right? They're not going to have two sets of college wrestling rankings. They're not going to have two sets of high school wrestling rankings. I think the number of podcasts they put out will obviously be reduced because you don't need, person A and B talking about what's going on in the world of sports and wrestling, and then persons B and C basically doing the same pod. So there'll either be integration and or elimination. I watched the Flow pod where Andy Hamilton was on with Piles and Ben Askren. And, Andy mentioned the ability to do some documentaries and things like that, that were down the line at Track. And I can say, because I had suggested doing some things and they just, the bandwidth or the desire to do that wasn't there. I think those are things that people really like to see, like the toughest bracket ever thing that Flow put out about 149, the Gable special, the Ben special, all these different specials are things that people like to see. And, it's behind the scenes stuff. It'll be very interesting. I think in the best of worlds, you get like the brackets and the integration and the stuff like that from Track. And then you get, some of the technology stuff with Flow. I think Flow is a little easier website to navigate. But I think both sides have done a great job in promoting the sport of wrestling. I think that's unquestionable. And I think the other thing is that people have a gold package with either one. Those are going to get blended in, and you'll probably pay the equivalent of both. I mean, I shouldn't say that, I don't know, but that would make sense. But then you get all the content with one membership.
Sure. And, Track did a lot of really, really good things. Their Track site that they had they must have did probably over half the high schools for their duels and for their tournaments. I mean, you could always find something on there to keep an eye on. So following the kids, so that's great. Hopefully Flow will do that. So I just hope there's other organizations out there like Track, like Flow, that don't get discouraged that they can't go out and put out the information out there, because I think we need that. As much information as we can get, the better we're going to be, if you know what I mean.
I know exactly what you mean. And I actually think that the pandemic has caused more people to come out and do podcasts, more people to come out and put events. Rockfin is starting to create a footprint in what they're doing. And so, I think there's also some integration things that are cool there. Like Track had created the OPC, the calculator, and all the certification stuff. So that'll obviously probably be administered very similarly, but eventually we'll have Flo's name on it. So,
Yeah.
so the first coaches rankings, we're recording this on Thursday. I talked to a couple coaches. They had to turn their stuff in, I think, by Tuesday or Wednesday. So I'm guessing those are going to come out either later today or tomorrow when the podcast actually gets put out by USA Wrestling. So we'll talk about those next week, but people should keep an eye out for those because they are a significant portion of the criteria for seeding. And a bunch of the seeding criteria this year is kind of go out the window or be very difficult, probably more so than ever. There's going to be a bunch of guys in one tier, and that's where the seeding committee is allowed to sort of debate and argue and do those things. And the coaches ranking is going to be super important. So people should keep an eye out for that.
And I agree. And, all these other ranking sites that, we talk about all 6 of them that we put the information up on and we have an average of everybody, we never want to lose those sites. I mean, they're very important for people to see where guys are ranked. And it's just, it's just a guess by most of the people that are doing rankings. I mean, you can go strictly by numbers and that's pretty much what they do. But the coaches poll, when it comes down to the rank seeding at the national tournament is, what they're going to use. So you kind of want to see how the other rankings compare to what the coaches think. And I guarantee the coaches are looking at all those other 6 rankings when they're doing their coaches poll because they haven't seen these kids this year.
I had a couple coaches reach out to me and say, because they'd worked with me when I was at track, and I said, hey, this is actually the compilation of 6 sources and send it to them so they could see. I will disagree with one point you said. I don't think most of these people are ranking based on the numbers. And the reason why I say that, and I don't think this is a bad decision, but Nick Aguilar is ranked and he's 0-4. And if you go by the numbers, that guy can't be ranked. I think it's what you and I talked about all the time was how far does stuff go back in the rearview mirror and become less relevant, right? Like Dayton Fix is 0-0. Stevan Misek is 0-0. They're ranked 1 and 2. And I think it'd be crazy for those guys not to be ranked 1 and 2, right? But there's other guys wrestling matches. Like if some guy from, I'll pick a school that doesn't have wrestling, like Alaska University, or like USC, Alabama, and they're 10-0, but they haven't wrestled anybody in the top 20. And these other guys who've made world teams and everything else, how do you decide where to go with that?
I don't know. I really, right now, I was just kind of going through what you were saying earlier, amateur wrestling news, and I don't understand this, but Dayton is not ranked by them.
But that's probably their formula, that they don't rank you until you wrestle. That's at least a criteria, right? Like Open Mat used to have that criteria. They had it the year with Kyle Snyder when he didn't wrestle for 21 days because he was traveling all over the world. But like the Nick Aguilar one is tough because like he's got a losing, he's winless. He's a very good wrestler, but he's wrestled a bunch of hammers. Yep. And so, but when you go into the seating meeting, he's going to be, he doesn't have a criteria over anybody. But what's crazy is the Big Ten seeds the tournament based on coaches' votes. So they might vote that guy 8th or 9th instead of 14th because, hey man, he's good. He just wrestled X, Y, and Z. Like, I'm from Missouri, and a couple of years, Wes Roper was in the Big 12, and the guys ahead of him were Nate Carr, Kenny Monday, and Roger Frizzell. He took 4th at the Big 12s, was seated 4th at the NCAAs, and took 4th at the NCAAs, and those are the same guys above him. So that's the argument for why Nick Aguilar should be ranked. And I think he probably should too. I think if I was ranking, he'd be ranked. But my point is, it's not just numbers, because at least it's not just 2021 or the 2020, 2021 season numbers. It's rear view mirror stuff. It's stuff from the past. It's even spring and summer wrestling. Like we had this conversation about when Gable Stevenson came in and never wrestled a college match. Where do you start him? Can't start him off the board, right? I mean, that's nuts. So
the only thing I was trying to get to, David, real quick, and then we'll move on. Stefan has not wrestled yet, correct?
Correct.
Amateur wrestling news have him ranked number 1 in their set of rankings. He hasn't wrestled yet. Now I'm wondering if Dayton's not ranked because he's been barred until a certain date in February to compete. That I don't know. But to me, if you have not wrestled yet and somebody else hasn't wrestled yet, they rank one and don't rank the other, what's the criteria they're using? And that's kind of what I'm sure fans are
Yeah.
wondering.
Now, if one of them was really good and one of them had never wrestled, you could see it, but they're obviously both really good.
Oh,
So
yeah,
you,
they're 1 and 2.
yeah. So, I mean, in the worst case scenarios, you go, okay, we're going to punish them for not wrestling, but we're going to both put them in like the top 5 or something. So I
Yeah.
agree with you with consistency.
All right.
So, Virginia Tech, North Carolina State, freaking unbelievable duel. I think you and I were actually texting each other on Friday night watching this. So there's been some miscommunication on how this duel was decided. So first of all, the duel ended up 16-16. Each team had one major and each team had 4 decisions. So each team had 5 wins, and each team had the same number of majors, pins, everything else. Okay. So the next criteria is match points. So this is the data from both flat track and flow wrestling. I almost said flack wrestling. So, which I don't think is what they'll call it. So you see here, the meet started at 33. Virginia Tech won, then North Carolina State won, then Virginia Tech won, then North Carolina State won, then VTech, then NC State, then VTech, then NC State. NC State put 2 wins in a row. And going into the last match, VTech had 43 match points and Virginia Tech had 44 match points. The reason why this matters is people think that the back points that happened, for people that didn't see the match, Sam Latona beat Jacob Camacho. He's losing 4-3. And in the last 6 seconds, he gets a takedown and 2 near fall. Okay, so you and me had a bunch of conversations about this. First of all, who would have won? We went back and looked it up. Second of all, NC State was out of challenges. Could they have challenged the back points? Because it looked like the back points swipe counted with started with 1.8 seconds left. Can you challenge whether or not there was 2 seconds for near fall? Third of all, would have made a difference. So let's walk through this. If Latona wins 5-4, then the final match points are 48-48. Then the next criteria is total number of near fall points. The only near fall besides that match, and in this hypothetical, he doesn't get them, were Bryce Andonian's. So Virginia Tech would have won anyway. Okay. So I think it's really hard as a coach. I actually texted Tony Roby and asked him if he knew where they were going into it. And he said he did. And I said, did you know that if the meet was tied, if Latona won by 1, what would happen? He goes, we actually had an assistant coach looking it up during the match. He goes, but I got so involved, I didn't get that answer. So first of all, I think we should just take a step back and go, the ACC is really low key good at wrestling.
Oh, without a doubt.
Without a doubt. You got those 2 schools, you got North Carolina, you got Pittsburgh. I mean, they got schools that are a bunch of top 20 kids in each weight there. Second of all, got to give Latona a lot of credit. He's a freshman, to keep his composure, just to keep coming forward. Even if he hadn't gotten the takedown, I think you can pat that kid on the back and go, good job, because he tried to win, and I think the hardest thing is to watch a guy just kind of stand around and not go for it. These 2 teams couldn't be more even. The other thing that was interesting to me was no team won 2 matches in a row till the 8th and 9th match of the duel, which changes a lot of stuff. So, so that was interesting.
Yeah.
So,
And, obviously the way the duel ended was phenomenal. I think Latona, to be honest with you, David, out wrestled his opponent for
Camacho?
most of the match. Yeah, I mean, he out wrestled him though. I mean, he was the one that was aggressive. Camacho never got in on his legs, if I can remember right. He was scoring off, counter shots. So, you got to give him credit there. He just kept going and going and just never stopped. And Camacho was backing out at the end. I mean, he stopped kind of wrestling. Being a coach, when we were coaching, we always told our kids, don't worry about the score. Don't worry about how much time's left. Just keep wrestling. You're going to be much better off if you continue doing what you've done the whole match than trying to hang on at the end. So But what a duel. I mean, from top to bottom, it was great competition. I guess another thing that kind of surprised me is that we had some kids that are ranked really, really high and didn't find a way to get the major. You know,
57, 65, right?
yeah, they had the match in hand, but they didn't push to get those majors. And, you know, that's going to make a difference at the national tournament. If your team's not willing to go out and put it on the line and get those extra bonus points, it's going to be harder for your team to walk away with the trophy at the end of Saturday night. So that's something you got to do all year long. You just don't pick that up at the national tournament. That's something, you know, you got to get used to during the year doing every time out. That's why Iowa has been so successful in the last 2 years is they're putting up a lot of bonus points.
And
These
Penn
kids,
State and Penn
yeah,
State for the years
and Penn
before that.
State, and I
Yeah.
think Michigan will once they get their full lineup in there. North Carolina State to me has been one of the top programs in the country in the last, you know, 5-6 years, without a doubt. They've had phenomenal recruiting classes. The kids are performing. I just kind of expected a little bit more out of some of these kids trying to get the bonus points. But besides that, it
Well,
was a phenomenal duel.
yeah, and I think what you're saying is right. Like, you're creating a habit whether you realize it or not, right? If you're always trying to get bonus, that's a habit. If you're not trying to get bonus, that becomes a habit. When I was talking about Penn State, I was talking about the Ed Ruth, David Taylor years, where like their bonus points alone were worth an 11th wrestler. You know,
But the difference between those guys is they went out there and they just wanted to have fun. They just wanted to wrestle and put up as many points as they could. They didn't care who they were wrestling. It didn't even look like they cared if they won or lost. They just wanted to go out and wrestle for 7 minutes and see how many points I can put up on the board, because it didn't matter who they were wrestling. They were still trying to do the same thing.
yeah. I mean, I think like I was that way in high school, and then you get to college and it gets harder, right? You know, so I mean, like,
Yeah, it gets a lot harder.
and then there's some guys that are able to do that in college that aren't able to do it at the world level. Yeah, I mean, I think everybody likes the idea of just going out and having fun and scoring points and not thinking about who you're wrestling. And then somebody puts their hands on you real hard, and then reality kicks in. You're like, maybe I should know who this guy is and what he does and prevent myself from getting my tail kicked in. So we're gonna jump around on the rankings here, kind of go through some things that happened, and we'll make sure we hit everything. 25, the big match was obviously Latona, Camacho. You and I talked about this last week. It'll be very interesting to see who gets seeded 2 and 3 now. Hildebrandt's undefeated, Courtney's undefeated, Latona's undefeated. If you're Hildebrandt and Courtney, what you really want is Camacho to beat Latona at the ACCs, because then they'd both have a loss, and it would keep you guys on the 2-3 side of the bracket. You and I kind of went through this exercise the other day, and there's a big match this weekend if they wrestle with Courtney and Brody Teskey, because, you know, Brody Teskey would potentially be, right now he'd be the number 2 seed in the Big 12 based on these rankings behind Taylor Lamont. But if Teskey were to go beat Courtney and then win the Big 12s, he could literally be the number 2 or 3 seed at the tournament. You know, obviously a lot of things can happen, but Hildebrandt looks like a pretty clear favorite to win the MAX. Courtney seems like a pretty clear favorite to win the Pac-12s. Obviously, Latona and Camacho are a coin flip. Then DiAgostino, Cronin, Ragusin, and all the rest of the Big Ten guys are all kind of, you know, none of those guys are probably going to win the conference because of Spencer Lee. So,
And, you know, we had talked earlier this week, David, about this, because we saw in some of the rankings, Sam Latona moved up from number 10 in the rankings to number 2 in one of the rankings, if I'm not mistaken.
yeah.
And it just seemed like an awfully big jump for one win. And I know he's undefeated, and that's great. But we got a lot of other undefeated kids that have wrestled, and they've been in college for a while and have a little bit more credentials. To jump, you know, to leapfrog those guys seemed a little bit premature at the time. So, yeah. And it was a great win. Obviously, he may have the best win so far at 125 because he knocked off a top 3 kid, you know, and so that's a great win. But the things you've done in college count, especially if you haven't lost. So
it's so hard to tell the quality of win, though, right? Because like the guys that beat Rayvon Foley, that was a huge win because he started the season at number 2. Yep. And now because he's lost other matches, that win's not as great. You bring up a really good point in rankings. So when Latona beats Camacho, you have to make a decision as a ranker. do I keep Camacho where he is and jump Latona above him? Do I keep Latona where he is and drop Camacho below him? Or do I kind of move him in the middle and just make sure Latona is still above Camacho? And I think most people kind of did the third one. One source at least, did it where they kept Camacho at 3, floated, and moved Latona up to 2. So
Yeah.
33, nothing super crazy happened. We obviously talked about the guys at the top not having wrestled yet. 41, nothing crazy happened. I just literally got up the phone with Lou Rosselli. They're not going to be able to wrestle Fresno this weekend because of COVID, which would have been a great match between Demas and DJ Loren. So that's not going to happen.
I would like, do you want to talk about Ironman's match against
oh, yeah,
Ohio State? This would be a good time to do it.
Etchemen, right?
Yep. You have a kid that Etchermen is so good on his feet, freestyle. It was a phenomenal match to watch. Jaden took him down in the second, I think it was the second period, with a little shrug move, and didn't have much time. Yeah, late in the seconds. So didn't have much time to ride him, and then decided to choose top in the third period. And within 20 seconds had his cradle locked up right to his back and pinned him. So, I mean, there is a huge difference between freestyle, being world-class in freestyle, and being world-class in collegiate style. And I think we saw that in that duel. But it's going to be interesting to see him progress over the next 4 years, because he's going to get a lot better underneath. He's not going to put himself in positions where a cradle's going to get locked up. He may get ridden out. He can live with that as long as he doesn't go to his back. But Jaden is so good at putting people on his back. I'm kind of surprised the way he wrestled on his feet, David. He changed his style. He shot in, but came right up to a seatbelt position. Didn't want to stay on the mat with Jaden, where he's really good at countering. And so they've coached him, to wrestle with guys like Jaden. So they're working on him. He's really raw yet, but he's very talented. It'd be fun to see how he progresses in the next 4 years.
Yeah, Etchermen did not make the mistake against Jaden that Max Murin made against Sammy Sasso, which is shooting that head inside single and getting cradled up. I mean, I'm just saying, like, they're very similar matches. I mean, for people that didn't see the match, the first period was scoreless. Etchemen actually got in once or twice. Second period, he picks neutral, and Jaden gets the takedown at the end of the period. I would have been fascinated to see if it was 0-0, do you have Jaden pick top, right? Because I think you argue, well, certainly you go, well, he pinned him, so he should pick top, right? But the thing was, he had the cushion, right? Like, even if Etchemen gets away when it's 2-0, okay, it's 2-1, you still got to take me down to win. When it's 0-0, and this guy's 90% of his life has been wrestling freestyle, I would have probably told Jaden to pick down 0-0, get your point, and make him come to you. I think now that he can do that, maybe you'd pick top, but that's the strategy of that would have been fascinating if it had gone 0-0 against 2-0. And it also is really interesting, like, coin flips decide a lot, like Hunter Bolin against Heidley, right? Like, he won on riding time because Hunter Bolin went down first, got away in like 6, 7, 5 seconds, and he knows I got to ride him for 1:08. If it's the other way around and you're riding in the second period, you kind of got to make a decision. How long do I think I can get out? Like, I'm going to try to ride him for 1:20. And the problem is, when you're not committed to a process, you usually don't get there. So I think that part.
But David, in that match, I think, and we'll probably talk about it down the road a little bit, I think Bolin could have rode him for 2 minutes if he wanted.
I'm not saying he couldn't have.
I'm saying it was amazing that Heidley, he was stuck. I mean, he just could not get off the bottom.
But let's be fair. He got to his feet a bunch. He just couldn't get away. It wasn't like he was just getting, like, couldn't get his face off the mat. So,
but it wasn't getting his hips away when he got to his feet. His hips were stuck so tight into Bolin, he was able to lift him and put him right back down without much of a struggle. So that's something I'm sure he'll go back and work on.
Yeah, we got to keep boogieing because we got about 15 minutes left here. So 149, probably the big thing here is Ridge Lovett wrestled. I don't know what that's going to mean for them. They got Brock Hardy there too. Andonian, I highlighted him just to give him a shout for winning the duel with the back points, or would have if it came down to that. Sammy Sasso pin Max Murin like we talked about, but nothing really changed too much in the rankings. 57, highlighting Josh Humphrey to see if he's wrestling, because if he isn't, he's ranked 8. That bumps everybody up a line. Justin Thomas beat Sheets in overtime. It was a crazy match. They go 1-1, then no takedown. Then Sheets rides Justin Thomas out. Then Sheets gets away, and it's 2-1. And then Justin Thomas takes him down at the end and wins. So not the normal way you'd see that happen. Sheets got that big leg wrap on him, but that helps Oklahoma in the seedings at the Big 12. Probably, maybe doesn't change much because David Carr's won and they just go from 2-3 to 3-2.
Yep.
But certainly a mental win there, and literally a physical win as well. 165. I highlighted these guys because I just think this is the tier, right? Like if you look at the averages, Mackay, Marinelli, Griffith, Whitlake, and Valencia are almost exactly 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 in the averages. It's basically just one difference for one off for Griffith and one off for Valencia. Then you got a bunch of guys that have never been on the podium before and went all the way down to Sparks at 15, and especially O'Toole. Those two freshmen are doing a lot of good things. I don't think it'd be surprising if Sparks and O'Toole were wrestling in the 5th and 6th place match or even higher.
No, not at all. I think I've been impressed with Keegan O'Toole all year, and Andrew Sparks, I didn't know a lot about until I started watching him this year. Kid's got a motor on him. He's not scared of, he's a true freshman. He's going out against these guys that are all Americans, and he's giving them every bit of what, they want from a true freshman. So he's going to be really good down the road. This year, there's just a lot of good kids at this weight. It's a real, after the top 4 or 5 guys, I think it's real even with that next group. So any of those guys could be an All-American, I think.
It's a good weight, but to be fair, there's only 2 guys I think that have stood on the podium, and that's Lewis and Marinelli. Griffith, Whitlake, Valencia, the rest of these guys haven't stood on the podium. So being ranked really high and then getting it done for 3 days are 2 different things. And Marinelli's come in at least twice and been finished below his seed.
Yeah, so, but of those top 4 guys there, the 3rd and 4th are only sophomores. So their first year of actually getting there was last year, COVID year. So it's really, they would have been All-Americans more than likely, David, by the way the seasons were going for them. So I think you got to give them a little bit of credit for what they did last year.
Give them a ton of credit. I'm just saying.
I think they're All-Americans.
Yeah.
By what they did last year. So I think there is a big drop off after 5. Not a big drop off, but there is a drop off.
There's a tier.
Then I think those guys are going to be trying to get up into that 5th and 6th and 7th and 8th place.
I clearly agree with you. That's why I highlighted it that way. I'm just saying that, it's different.
They haven't been there yet.
Then a bunch of guys that are literally 3-time podium guys, that's a little scarier. 174, I think the match of the weekend was Kemmer Romero. For people that didn't see it, Kemmer won. He won on a headgear point and on a stalling point, basically for push outs or edge or whatever you want to call it. Romero rolled his ankle a little bit, was unable to hold the ground. But I think Romero is close. Like, I think if he's healthy, it's a close match. It's pretty much, he wasn't healthy and it was a close match. And Dustin Plott, I told you about him off the air this summer, and that he didn't get to wrestle with Tuttle last year, was banged up, super legit kid, keeps moving his way up, and it feels like he's replaced Montalvo. Clearly, John will make that decision, but he's got good problems to have there. Those are first world problems, those 2 guys to decide between.
And just a quick thing on Romero, last year when he had wrestled Kemmer, score was 7-1. Kemmer pretty much controlled the match. I think Kemmer kind of controlled, maybe not the match this time, but the positioning of what he wanted to do. So until he gets in and starts getting in on leg attacks, Romero's improved tremendously on his defense. I'm just still waiting to see a little bit more offense from him when he's hitting the top tier guys. He's doing it to the other guys. He's got to be able to do that to the top tier guys.
Yep. 84, So one of the rumors is that Miles Amin is going to go up to 97. I texted Kellen Russell, didn't get confirmation of that. Also, I think Michigan's trying to put together a duel this weekend with Penn State, because they both had duels canceled. So I think they're trying to put that together. We'll see what happens. If we get time, we're going to try to hit. I mean, we're probably going to fly through and get to it. They have Michigan has, I think, Ohio State on Friday night. So I'm not going to go through this because there's a lot of time, but Keckeisen down to Taylor Venz feels like a tier where a lot of those guys could pop in. Nelson Brands lost to Max Lyon on a 4-point chin drop. So 97, the first number one of the year goes down. Noah Adams up at altitude, which I think is a real thing, loses to Stephen Buchanan, who's a super high upside guy. We watched him wrestle with the Big 12 last year. And I say we, all the guys that did the commentary, his range is like, man, he could beat anybody. And then sometimes he just did some freshman things. You're like, where like he'll beat himself. And I think if they can work on him doing that, that's significant. I highlighted Cordell Norfleet here. The Win Magazine has him at number 10. I don't understand that. And the reason why that's significant is he would be neck and neck with Jacob Warner for number 2. Norfleet's undefeated, and he stuck Buchanan the same day that Buchanan beat Adams. So I think there's an argument for Norfleet to be 2. This is I think Andy Hamilton put out Schultz, Warner, Norfleet, and Caffey are all Illinois high school kids. So it's interesting that they're all spread out. None of them are actually at Illinois, and they're kind of killing the game. AJ Ferrari beats Jake Woodley, keeps moving up. And then Schultz beat Caffey in a good match where one source had that Caffey won the match, but Schultz actually won the match.
Yeah, I saw that source. I thought, oh, Schultz lost 2. 1 and 2 both went down, but obviously it was a misprint. So, yeah, that's like we said all year. This is going to be a weight that I still think guys in start of the season 9 and below, you're going to have 5 or 6 of them being All-Americans, and
yeah,
you're starting to see them move up the ladder too as the year goes on, and that's kind of what I thought. Noah Adams had such a great year last year, undefeated, beat everybody he wrestled. Was doing the same thing this year. Didn't have the match he probably wanted to happen, but I still think he will be a force toward the end of the year.
No doubt. 285, the big news, Kirkfleet's out for the year. So Neville's is in. That obviously hurts Penn State's chances. Ethan Laird is a guy that I've kind of been high on. I watched him beat Zach Elam, who I think is a very good wrestler in freestyle. And he just beat Jordan Wood. That's news for 2 reasons, because Jordan Wood came back, so he's now in the rankings, and Laird beat him. So that's also relevant. So just some big things to point out there. Let's go to the team scores. Iowa, big lead. Michigan sort of on the next tier. Then you got Penn State, NC State, Oklahoma State there. Penn State will drop if nothing else happens, because the Kirkfleet points will come off the board, and they'll go from 3 to probably 5 or maybe even 6. Then you got Nebraska and VTech right there. And I think people need to understand too, VTech is behind NC State, but this is not dual meet rankings. This is tournament rankings. And this is where if you had 3 number 1s, that's going to beat one team that's got 10 guys ranked number 8. And obviously that number 8, the team with 10 8s would kill the team with 3 studs and 7 bums in a dual meet. So it makes sense to you and me. It doesn't make sense to a lot of other people sometimes, but these are not team rankings like people sit down and think who the best teams are. They rank the 10 teams, and then you just add the points up. Yep. Okay, so last thing we got, I think literally 4 minutes here, if my timer's right. Couple big duels this weekend. Ohio State, Michigan, gigantic. Iowa, Penn State got canceled because Iowa is canceling activities. Arizona State, UNI on Saturday. Missouri, Oklahoma State, West Virginia, Wyoming on Saturday. Be interesting to see who sends which starters. Arizona State also wrestles Iowa State. UNI obviously wrestles Iowa State. That's a tri-meet there, all on Saturday, or that's all on Sunday rather. Excuse me. So,
David, the Oklahoma State, is that the little
Cowboy
mini tournament that they're putting on?
Yeah, the
Is
Cowboy
that
Classic.
this weekend?
That
I
is
had heard,
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I had heard that some of the teams are not going to send a lot of their starters because of COVID. They're afraid this getting so late in the year, they don't want to have them anywhere besides in the little bubble that they're in at home. So I think some of the matches we were really hoping to see, obviously 197, it may not happen. So
We'll see.
uh,
197 at that meet would be insane. You got Rocky Elam, AJ Ferrari, Noah Adams, and Stephen Buchanan.
yep.
So I don't think that Adams and Buchanan would wrestle again. I mean, I don't think, but they could. But
Yep.
if you said to me, you get those 4 guys and everybody else gets the field, I'll bet you those 4 guys place at nationals. I'll take all 4 of them.
You're going to take all 4?
The place.
I think 3 of the 4 are going to place.
Yeah. Buchanan might be a blood round guy, but he's got a lot of upside. So
He does. And he's a good kid. He's young. I don't think all 4 from the same conference will. I mean, they're going to have to go
well,
through.
that
some
won't be
pretty
the same
good kids.
conference. Rocky Elam's in the MAC.
Oh, that's true. Okay.
Yeah, you're
So-
used to Mizzou
Yeah,
being
I'm
over
used to
there.
Mizzou being
Yeah.
over there. And that's
Yeah.
something, I really wanted to see Mizzou and Oklahoma State go at each other. I
Those
think
duels
that,
have been great over the years. Yeah.
that would have been another North Carolina State, Virginia Tech type of match. I think there would have been some bonus points, but I think they would have been on both sides. So it wouldn't have been 16-16. It might have been 24-24 at the end of the day, but it
Yeah.
would have been fun to watch. And, hopefully some of the kids, I know a lot of the backups are going to get a chance, but then I think the coaches are worried about if we send our backups to these tournaments or to this outing, and then they come back and they mingle with our kids, with Iowa being in pause right now and not being able to do anything for the next week or 2 weeks, some coaches are getting a little bit worried. And I understand that. You've got to keep your kids really in a bubble at this point,
Yeah.
because you don't
Tough.
want this. You're running out of time. Conference tournaments are in 3 weeks, most
Yeah.
of them.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
doesn't do you much good.
Yeah, for sure. So we got about 2 minutes left. You and me did an Ohio State, Michigan pick preview. Just don't have time to get to it. I think we
okay.
will see the duel like 6-4 Michigan. It'll probably end up 6-4, and we'll each have picked 4 matches wrong, and it'll end up being right. It's like the price is right.
We did not agree on all the matches, first
No.
of all. And
Well-
we also did Penn State and Iowa, and we didn't agree on all the matches there. So but that's not going to happen. So we're not going to show it. But I'm going to
Yep.
tell you right now, David was a big Iowa fan in this, and I think he picked Iowa to win 10-0. But I didn't think that was
Stop
going to
that.
happen.
Stop that.
All right.
Hush your mouth. Hush your mouth. We'll actually put up the picks. And next week, I want to talk to you about 141 and how they're going to seed it at the Big Tens. You got 3 undefeated guys, but we want to make sure we get our time in. Watch these duels this weekend, especially Friday night, and hopefully they have that Sunday duel between Michigan and Penn State. That'd be fantastic. Quick shout out to Sergey Beloglasov and Kellen Russell for coming on the pod. That came out. It'll be 3 days ago when you guys see this. Awesome. Listen to guys like Sergey and Kellen. Let's sign off by saying we're made possible through a partnership with USA Wrestling, the national governing body for the sport of wrestling in the United States, and sponsored by Nike Wrestling. Visit athleteps.com for all of your Nike Wrestling and USA Wrestling branded wrestling gear. Mark, you're the man. Can't wait to talk to you next week. Thanks everybody for watching and listening. Have a great day.
Bye, Dave.